I was camping with my best friend in the summer of 2006. We always went to the same area about 100 miles away from our hometown. Camping was our thing, our favorite thing to do. We always brought a bunch of food, drinks, and equipment. And one time, when we woke up in the morning and came out of our tent, all of our stuff was gone. So from then on, we would always set up a camera at night. We would skim through the usually boring footage the next day. Honestly, we never saw anything exciting and never caught anyone stealing from our sight. But this one time, we were watching the footage while eating breakfast and were horrified to see a guy walk into our campsite and sit in a chair that was facing our tent. We watched the clock on the footage, and he sat there for 20 minutes. Then, without warning, the footage showed the man get up, walk over to our tent, and unzip it. He then climbed inside. As you can imagine, we were freaking out. 5 minutes later, the man climbed back out and disappeared. I have no idea how we didn't wake up, and I have no idea what he did while he was in the tent with us. It literally makes me shiver every single time I think about it. I go camping alone. I know that's not a typical thing people do, but I find it peaceful. I go fishing, cook, and read. This one specific time, however, something happened that made me change my camping location permanently, and I'm not nearly as comfortable going alone as I once was. It was the middle of the night, and I woke up to the noise of something brushing my tent. This has happened so many times before, so I figured it was just the wind. It didn't occur to me that it could be a person until it said, "Come out of there. I want to show you this." The only protection I brought was a pocket knife, so I grabbed it and sat silently, scared out of my mind. After whoever it was said that, they stopped brushing my tent, and I didn't hear anything else. I waited about 10 minutes and decided to attempt to make it to my truck, leaving all of my stuff behind. I slowly unzipped the front flap and peeked my head out. It was so dark, I couldn't see anything, and that's when I panicked. I had no idea if there was a person 2 inches from my face. I got out and started speed walking to my truck. Oh shit, I'm an idiot. I forgot my damn keys. I turned around and started to go back, still not able to see anything. I reached my tent and crawled inside. I grabbed the keys and got back out. Still nothing. No noise. Nothing. I felt relieved, as now I assumed they had walked off away from my tent, and I figured it was just somebody playing pranks on the campers around here. When I got to my truck, I unlocked it and got inside. As soon as the door closed, someone tried to open the door from the other side. I let out a gasp of fear and peered outside. I could see nothing. I started the engine and drove away. I went camping in Big Sur, California with one of my best friends. It was off-season and a Sunday night, so the place was practically empty. We picked a campsite about a half-mile walk to the ocean. It was in a huge, open field surrounded by a lush forest. In the background were limestone mountains, and you could hear the crashing of the ocean's waves. We spent the night around a campfire telling stories and eating. We're both pretty experienced backpackers too. We are very diligent in ensuring we do not leave any trace of food by our site. I have my dog with me too. She was leashed around one of the few trees in the field on a long metal leash and full harness. It's a full moon, and it was pouring beautiful blue light across the field. It was absolutely pristine and breathtaking. Around 1 a.m., something spooks my dog. Now, she is used to the woods, but I mean, she is flipping out, tugging hard on the leash, like she is desperate to escape. She pulls so hard that her harness snaps and she goes bolting across the field into the wilderness. I lose my cool. I drop everything and bolt after her. I'm not thinking straight, running into the woods at night. My only concern was getting her, even if it meant risking my own safety. I rescue her. I find her curled up in a random clearing in the woods, looking ashamed and terrified. Thank God she ran in a straight line. Otherwise, I would have been totally lost. I walk back carrying her, and my heart is pounding furiously at the horror of the idea of her being lost in the wilderness forever. The thought now is still unbearable. I can feel her heart pounding too in my arms. She's terrified. I'm no longer in a great mood. We all head to bed in my tent, but my dog won't lay down. She refuses. Her ears are up, and she's staring intensely at the tent wall, as if she could see right through it, and she's tracking something. It takes a while for my nerves to calm down from my chase earlier. I'm working hard at deep breaths and reminding myself that I'm prepared for anything that I could encounter. That my dog is simply spooked from maybe a raccoon. Maybe she's just exhausted and acting up. Then I hear it, cackling, like a high-pitched laughter that is full of a disgusting type of joy, and it's coming from outside my tent. My senses go on high alert. My body tenses up so tightly, it's like I'm about to break in half. I can't even breathe. And then I hear more cackling, like a group of witches were doing something evil just yards away. It fills my ears, laughing and more laughing. It's loud and it just sounds so wrong. I can't even bring myself to move to look at my friend. It's like my entire body has given up. The laughs are then followed up with blood-curdling screams. It honestly sounded like somebody was being murdered. It was full of panic and horror and sadness. Dear God, it could have been wolves or coyotes killing their prey, but it sounded so distinctly human. The laughter, the sobbing, the screams. Finally, my friend says something. What? What the hell? I even begin to laugh a little because the situation was so intense and wild. I had no idea how else to react. I can't handle this, I say, and suggest that we bolt for the car. It's a mile away, so we decide to stay. We just listened to the laughter and screaming until it faded away. When it was over, I didn't bother going to bed. Camping with two friends, the middle of the night. All three of us inside a square tent, just chilling out, chatting. The lights are on. One side of the tent wall begins to cave inward, as if there's strong wind or something pushing on the side of the tent. Everyone freaks out, but I assume it's the wind. Chill out, guys. I proceed to jump up and punch the tent wall, but then I connect with something. A feeling of punching flesh is unmistakable. Now I freak out. What or who did I just punch through the tent wall? I eventually convince my friends it's the smartest idea to have a look outside the tent. But it's been 15 minutes, and by the time they agree, there's nothing out there. I was in my tent, and it was the middle of the night, perhaps 1 a.m., and I had woken up to go pee just like normal. I was about to unzip the tent when I heard a small scratching sound. I paused. It was a slow, deliberate, crunchy, digging sound. It was too rhythmic for an animal. So after making sure it wasn't my dad who was sharing the tent, I unzipped a corner of the door and peeked out. The moon was just bright enough for me to see a woman squatting right next to our little two-man tent, digging at the ground with her bare hands. My dad went and shined a flashlight on her and told her to go back to wherever she had made camp. The woman got up silently, leaving a 4-inch deep hole next to the tent, and started walking away. I went outside, went pee, and got back into my sleeping bag. A few minutes later, I was awoken again by a clattering sound of a person or an animal walking around where we had put our stuff. I looked outside again, and the woman was crouched low, walking around our stuff and looking at things the way a monkey would. My father stepped out of the tent, shined the flashlight on her again, and she faced him. He asked her to kindly leave our stuff alone, but she just stood there, dirty, but clearly not malnourished, staring at his light. He gave up and went back to the tent. Soon, we heard her digging again at her little hole, which was literally 6 inches and 2 pieces of thin nylon away from my head. I shouted for her to go away, and she ran away in an animalistic fashion and didn't return. I fell back asleep, and in the morning, our stuff was scattered, but nothing was missing. My family holds a camping trip at least twice a year. One year I was walking through the woods with my cousins, and off in the distance, on top of a huge boulder, was a very large cooler. As we were climbing up the boulder to the cooler, we spotted a man, older than us, maybe about 40 years old, leaning against another boulder, watching us. He was smoking a cigarette. He was wearing old-looking torn jean shorts. You know the kind, that used to be pants, and a wife beater. Honestly, we could tell from the sight of him that he was bad news. The creepiest part of this encounter was he was smiling at us. It felt like he was waiting for us to look inside the cooler, but when we saw him, we climbed back down. We turned around, going back the way we came. None of us said a word to him, and he just smoked his cigarette, smiled, and watched us leave. I really doubt there was sodas and beer in that cooler, if you know what I mean. I was camping in Lake Tahoe as a teenager. The usual trip my family took. We would hike, and usually my dad would take the boat up to the lake. This one particular trip, we had heard from a park employee that a little boy had gone missing. Everyone was looking for him. Myself, my brother, and my dad all went to look as well. We looked for a few hours, but didn't find him or any trace of him. We left the next day, and we didn't find out if the boy was found or not. The very next year we went back to the same place, and on our first day camping, we went for a hike. On the trail, I walked out into the trees to go pee. That's when I saw a little blue shirt a few feet away hanging on a tree branch. It didn't click with me at first, but when it did, I returned to the trail and told my dad. He went out and looked, and when we got back to our camper, he drove off in his truck to go tell someone. When my dad returned, he said that he was told that the boy that went missing was wearing a blue polo shirt. This sent chills down my spine. The next day, we went on the same trail, and I went back to where I found the shirt. It was gone. The one and only time I ever went camping with my boyfriend, something crazy happened. It was a popular campsite, and there were many people there when we were. It was in the middle of summer. At some point, we decided to go skinny dipping in the river that wasn't too far after the sun went down. We walked down to the river, and as we expected, nobody was there. While we were messing around in the water, and again, let me remind you, we were not wearing anything, a man appears out of nowhere and is standing in the sand looking at us. I was terrified because the creepy man just stood there. My boyfriend asked him if everything was okay, and I could hear in his voice that he was scared. The man ignored his question and then started walking into the water towards us. I can't tell you what this was like to where you would understand. It was ridiculous, right out of a scary movie. We both started swimming across the river to the other side. We didn't want this creep to get to us. We made it to the other side and saw that he was very close. Naked, not caring, we ran into the trees and up to the campsite on the other side of the river. Luckily, it was very dark and nobody saw us. We ran into a bathroom that was connected to the campsite and just stood there, shivering and asking ourselves if this shit was actually happening. Eventually, we went back to the river and saw that the man was gone. We swam back across. We reached the other side and saw that our clothes and phones were gone. We went back up to the path to our tent and lucked out again. Nobody ever saw us, except that creep. We got dressed and drove up to the office to explain that somebody stole our stuff, but we had to lie and say that it happened during the day because obviously skinny dipping was not allowed. We never saw the clothes or our phones again. What the hell was that guy doing, walking into the river towards us? Your guess is as good as mine. Camping in Yellowstone National Park with my wife. It started pouring rain unexpectedly one night, and we were forced to ditch our tent and sleep in the SUV. It was thundering very loudly, and all of a sudden we hear a knock on the driver's side window. I wasn't looking at the window when it happened, and when I looked up at it, I saw no one. My first thought was that it was someone who needed something or needed help. Hesitantly, I rolled the window down. The rain was coming down hard, and it was so dark, I couldn't see anything. I yelled outside, "Hello?" But nobody responded, and a few seconds later, someone walked by my window towards the front of the car and circled around the front to the passenger side. My wife flipped out and locked the door. We could both see whoever it was stop by her door, and then they tried opening it. I rolled my window back up and locked my side, and seconds later, the person vanished. It was horrifying. I was on summer break and went camping with my friend and his parents. We went to the lake during the day and did the s'mores thing at night. His parents shared a tent while my friend and I had our own. I can't remember where the campsite was, and I'm not really in contact with my friend anymore. But 15 years later, I'm assuming it wasn't the safest place to camp. Here's why. I woke up sometime in the early morning, like 3 or 4 a.m., and immediately saw a man's face looking in the tent at us. He had unzipped the door just enough to stick his head inside. He looked absolutely insane. He had big eyes and wild hair. I was so stiff from fear, I literally couldn't do anything. The man kept moving his head from left to right, very, very slowly, as if it was uncontrollable. I guess my friend could hear me breathing loudly or something, because he woke up too. He had the same reaction as me, and just laid there in terror, looking at this mysterious man. I'm not certain how long he was sitting there looking at us, but it felt like hours, shaking his head back and forth. At some point, we heard a noise close by, and so did the man. He disappeared quick, and a couple minutes later we got out of our tent and woke up his parents. The guy was long gone. I'm still afraid of camping to this day.